Rebelling and rebellious.
I'd like to call the meeting to order. Welcome everyone to the final Board Boundaries Committee meeting. And Madam Clerk, if you could please have a roll call.
Chairwoman Jessica Stigma,
Present.
Vice Chairman Nicolas Narducci,
Here.
Councilwoman Mary Kay Harris,
Present.
Councilor Rachel Miller,
Present.
Nicholas Freeman,
Present.
5 present, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Well, welcome everyone. Madam Clerk, yes. Okay.
So, Madam Chair, before we go into public comment, we'll let the committee know that I did receive some testimony today. I received 13 emails from people. There are 2 people that are for map 1 and 11 for map 2. If you could just have them entered into the record, that would be great.
Do I need a motion for that, Madam Clerk?
Please.
Can I accept a motion to enter those?
Motion made to accept.
Second. Any other conversation? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Guys have it. Thank you, Madam Clerk. We will be discussing that further. So thank you, Madam Clerk, for providing this information to us. Thank you all for joining us this evening. We are accepting public comments via the Zoom feature here. And what we'll do is we'll ask you to raise your hand and then you will be allowed to speak. I'd like to remind everyone that as per the charter, we are not able to know the location of anyone's address who is an incumbent or who is a potential candidate for office. So please do not share addresses with us. We understand people might feel strongly about that, but we as a committee are very much in favor of sticking to our charter obligation, which says that we are not to consider where incumbents or candidates live. So, Madam Clerk, I see that we have one attendee with.
Madam Chair, excuse me, before we go on, can we recognize that Councilman Curry is with us, Councilman Anthony, and Councilman Gonzalez?
Yes, thank you.
They are on by Zoom, and in the room attending with us are also Councilman Vargas and Councilwoman Castillo.
Thank you.
And the solicitor on this evening is Kenneth Cheverini.
We also have in attendance our consultants, Ryan Taylor, who is in the room with us, and Kim Brace is with us via Zoom, so thank you to them as well. I believe Frank Magellia was first, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Maglio, I've unmuted you. If you could please just state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Frank Meglia, 385 Westminster, 4D.
Please proceed.
I just wanted to give my feedback. I would like to see the utilizing the map for downtown as a whole and be represented by one councilman rather than split it up. Downtown has unique needs that you don't see in our suburbs or our neighborhoods.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
The next person I am allowed to speak is the Jewelry District Association. Please state your name and address for the record.
Sharon Steele, 95 Chestnut Street in Providence. May I begin?
Yes, please.
This is the third time I've testified before this committee and didn't think I would need to restate our position, but apparently it's not just our position. We have stated unequivocally, there's no good reason to divide downtown. No one has even suggested that you should divide downtown. Your mission is to keep communities of interest together, yet you still submitted a map that divided downtown when no one even suggested that you should do that. In fact, you were told by multiple people, multiple times, that we would all appreciate it, that you do not divide downtown. But unfortunately, you took it upon yourself to do it anyway. The map that does that simply is unacceptable because you have ignored what you have heard, and the fact that you divided community, a very important community of interest, is something that frankly many of us simply do not understand. I'd also like to mention that you took a piece of what was represented in the original map A, and which is unfortunately represented in the unacceptable map, and somehow removed it. That top right-hand piece needs to be retained in the final map. And as long as that's understood, thank you for accepting my testimony.
Thank you, Sharon.
The next person is Alan Sondheim. Please state your name and address for the record.
385 Westminster Street, and my name is Alan Sondheim. I just want to read a short thing that I wrote and sent to you for the public. This is the first time in my life living in Providence that I felt we had good representation, and this is a result of belonging to District 1 with John Gonsalves. We identify with all of downtown and with the Fox Point area for clear reasons in terms of a multicultural urban environment. Gonsalves has done a great deal of work uniting us and serving the Providence community at large. Splitting the ward splits and undoes everything he's been able to accomplish for us, and there's no point in that. It's bad politics. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Is there anyone else via Zoom who would like to speak? Yes, I see Doug Victor has his hand raised.
Doug, please state your name and address for the record.
Yes, my name is Doug Victor, 103 Princeton Avenue in the Elmwood neighborhood. I just want to thank you for this process. It's been really interesting to follow it, and I feel like the two maps that you have come up with are really edging toward more equity across the city in terms of keeping neighborhoods together. I feel like my voice has been listened to, and I strongly encourage you to listen to the folks who are speaking to keep the downtown Ward 1, the whole of downtown in Ward 1. I think that's really, really important. And I look forward to more discussion, even though this is the end. We will have some opportunity probably at City Council. I'm not quite sure of that, but I'm expecting that we will. So thank you for your work. Thank you for your transparency and your inclusion. That's all I have to say.
Thank you so much, Doug. I think Councilor LaFortune has her hand raised.
Yes, but I wasn't sure if you were done with the other participants' testimony. I could talk after.
Nope, you're fine. Please go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So thank you, Chair, and thank you all the members of the Committee on Ward Boundaries. And I think I expressed my, when I spoke with you, I expressed some of my concerns. I do agree that we should not split the downtown area for many reasons. But one of the things that I noticed, particularly in Ward 3, is that if there were any adjustments that were made, one of the maps shows that we would pick up some of Benefit Street. But it looks like with both of those maps, we do lose Nathan Bishop Middle School. And one of the things that I'm concerned with is that majority of the students who attend Nathan Bishop Middle School are either being bused in or they live in the Ward 3 community. And so that would, I just fear that the people who are sending their kids there, who are going there for meetings, which have seen Nathan Bishop as one of their community schools, they would lose a say in certain decisions that might be made at the school. And so that is one of my biggest concerns with losing that, considering like the catchment is the Mount Hope community, but also when we think about Ward 3, Mount Hope is the center of that ward. And I want to make sure that, the people in Mount Hope have a voice, they have representation, and we're not forgetting about them.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else on the Zoom at the moment who would like to speak? Anyone else here like to revive?
Yes, I want, first of all, I want to say thank you because you working hard with this map. But Ward 9 is not happy. When you say, I need population, and they say I move 2 street to 11, and they present the map to me, I don't have like any concern because, it's not Ward 10 go inside and court, and take out for us the whole Union Park. So my people, I represent more Latino community, and they don't be comfortable to go to your meeting because most of the time you don't have a translation for them. We don't agree with that map. We not happy, and we want to keep Ward 9 in the same way. Even we got, because we believe, we can take that 2 street for the Ward 11, but our population can be really right there. We don't have to move to nowhere. Ward 10 don't have to go inside. The Ward 11 can go a little bit with the Ward 10 and don't affect, the population with Ward 10. So we're not happy, and that's just my testimony on behalf of my community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Anyone else? Councilman Correa.
Yes, good evening, Madam Chair and committee members. Again, I want to thank you all for a job well done this time around. As I stated in several of the meetings that were held, I would just ask that whichever map that this committee decides that it wants to pass out and present to the full council, that you take into account, as I have stated before, what had happened to Ward 6 10 years ago. The residents of Ward 6, the Mount Pleasant neighborhood here, as I stated before, they don't have a neighborhood school. They don't have a neighborhood park.
They don't have a polling place. When it comes time to vote, they need to go to two adjacent wards to cast their ballots. And what happened 10 years ago to them was completely, totally a disgrace, a last minute map that came out of nowhere that took a Pac-Man bite out of this neighborhood. And again, whatever map that this committee decides that it wants to pass out and pass on to the full council, I would strongly ask that you take into consideration what happened to the residents of Ward 6 10 years ago. And hopefully, once the map gets to the full council for further discussion and whatnot, that my colleagues also would do right and restore what was wrongfully taken from the residents of Ward 6. But again, regardless, I want to thank yourself, Jess, and everybody there on the committee for a job well done this time. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. See, there's one attendee.
Michelle, I unmuted you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Michelle Zabrowski, Barstow Street.
Thank you.
I just concur with Michael Carrera as he just spoke about Ward 6. Ward 15 has an issue. I'm on the cusp of 4 different wards. Map A is the best for Ward 15 and Ward 6. As you know, 10 years ago, I think Ward 15 took so much before, and now we have to give so much away. Also, when we have these condo units coming in and there's like 150 or 200 per building, it would only take 2 buildings to vote, and they basically choose for all the people in the residents. And that's not the way it should be. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay. Seeing no other hands raised, I think we can move on. Okay.
We have to make a motion to come out of the public speaking in. No.
Thank you for asking.
Just wanted to check.
Of course. So briefly, I wanted to go over again for everyone in attendance tonight, the bounds by which our committee drew these maps and worked on these maps. And so we are bounded by the Home Rule Charter to have some very specific things we must follow. First, we must have 15 wards. We're to redraw them using the next slide.
Great.
Yep, perfect, thank you. We are to redraw them using the most recent decennial census data, and that's the only data that we can use to count up population. Our requirements is that we were to have 4 public hearings prior to submitting the maps to City Council. We held 5. We must submit a report to the council that goes over the criteria we employed and analysis of the decisions we made, and we have drafted that, and we will be submitting that to the full council. And we must abide by the Open Meetings Act, and we have done that by posting meetings in advance, posting them on the Secretary of State's website, getting the word out. Next slide, please. The charter also outlines very specific criteria that we must use. And we'll go, I think we're going to go through this tonight when we talk about the lines we've drawn and sort of thinking about these things that we've balanced. This is what's in the charter, but we don't have to go in order of it. And as a committee, we sort of discussed that we were really interested in sort of weighing what was important based on what we heard, sort of the balance that we had. So the first thing we must do is equality of population, and that's where the census data comes in. So we know, we learned through our work through this committee, that all wards grew, but some wards grew more than others. And so that created some choices we had for where population for a ward had to grow versus where population for a ward had to shrink, because some wards were then overbalanced and some were underbalanced. And we have to keep equality of population as much as possible. Then we must consider wards that are contiguous. So we need as much as possible to keep districts in physical contact with some other part of the district. We must comply with the Voting Rights Act. So this means that we must ensure that we are not impeding someone's ability to vote. And to do this, we employed some use of racial data, which wasn't our main focus, but was definitely part of the analysis we used when we're looking at this to make sure that we aren't creating inadvertent ways to keep people from being able to vote and vote for someone that they would like to. Next, the charter states that we must look at communities of interest. And this is where all of this really rich and wonderful public testimony has come in, where people have submitted maps. They've told us what they like about the maps we've drawn. They've told us what they don't like about the maps we've drawn, and they've told us what they think their neighborhood is, what they think their neighborhood isn't. And so I feel like we've heard a lot of that, and we can go over that again. We must, as much as possible, keep the wards compact, so things are relatively near each other. We can go over why that might not work in all cases, but we tried our best to keep those things. And finally, as we've stated several times, even tonight, that we do not consider where any political candidate lives or where any incumbent lives. So we might have seen a map that might have drawn candidates out or kept candidates in or put candidates in other, and believe me, when we say I do not know anyone's address, we did not use this in any way as a way to move folks around. This was none of our concern. And then finally, as a committee, over the past year, we've discussed some other principles that we felt really strongly about when we all got together and sort of talked about our ideals for our work. We were really interested in trying to bring together places where a community can gather, where a neighborhood meeting could be held, or where a polling location could be within the boundary of the ward. We, to the best of our ability, were trying to mitigate having to cross a highway or a large road boundary. That might not be the case. We might have to make some choices there, but that is what we had initially thought, and I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. We were really strong about maintaining political neutrality, and we were very concerned about making sure we were transparent and we facilitated as much community engagement as we could, even when we were conducting our own business with the community, with the council, and our consultants. Just letting everyone know. Okay. The next, so this is what we had to work with initially. This is where we saw the city ward deviation from our ideal population or quality of population in each ward, which is 12,754 when we considered the post-inmate allocation. And as many of you know who've been paying attention to this, and the committee knows, we went with the state's data set, which moved some people who were counted in Cranston at the ACI on April 1st, 2020, and moved them back to Providence. We moved back 375 people who were scattered throughout the wards. So we see, this is the map we had to work with. So we see here, the map on the right gives us the percent deviation. We know that we need to stay within 5% below, or within 5% below, or 5% above population deviation. So there were several wards that had population below, Ward 13 and Ward 9, population outside the bounds of that -5%. We also know we had 2 wards that were outside the bounds on the opposite side, Wards 15 and 12. So what happens here is that a lot of the change that needed to happen is right in the center of the city. And we can't go beyond our natural boundaries of the city of Providence. So we're bouncing against Johnston and Cranston and North Providence here. So you'll see some changing happening in the center of the city because that's where we had to go, knowing that we had some sort of pushing on the outside. Okay. So we know we went through a process of having 4 initial maps. From that, we whittled ourselves down to 2 maps. Our consultant worked with us to gather the feedback that we heard, both in public testimony. We spoke with city councilors. We feel we had a lot of ample time for folks to come and talk with us about the boundaries. And so we asked our consultant to give us the final 2 maps that we can talk about tonight. And so what I wanted to do was start by looking at these 2 maps and thinking about where we can all, as a committee, agree that we think that the maps look good. We know that in maps 1 and 2, we know we have some differences in 5 and 6, and we have differences in 12, 13, 1, 2, and 3. If we look in the southern part of the city, in wards 10, 11, 9, and 8, these look the same on both maps. I am comfortable with this configuration, and I think my committee members are too. Is that your understanding, committee members?
Yeah, I would say so. I want to thank the consultants and everyone on the committee. I think these 2 maps are an improvement over the 4 that we saw last week and worked off of that map A that we talked about. I will say that over the last week, we've gotten a lot of testimony, especially over the weekend since these maps were released. And the overwhelming thrust of the testimony has been about how map 1 divides downtown and speaking negatively of it. So I think that there are certainly some things that we can try to tweak and try to improve on either of these maps. But just given that by my count, including the verbal testimony we just had over Zoom, I think it's 16 different people since last Monday have spoken out against dividing downtown. So I would prefer to work off of map 2 if we could and try to address some of the remaining sticky issues that we have to work out here from that starting point.
Great. So I'll just explain a little bit about that. So knowing that 13 had to grow because 13 was negative 6.7 in our deviation map, it has to go somewhere, right? These are the choices before us, committee, that it had to go somewhere. And we know that once you move some boundaries, other boundaries will then shift because we have to keep population equal. So we know that this wasn't something that we did to hurt or damage anyone. This was because this is an option to ensure that 13 is as equal as the rest. We know that if you move 13 into downtown, we know that then we may not have the opportunity to keep Ward 12 out of the east side, which was something that we had heard as well. Right now, Ward 12 boundaries abut Benefit Street. And so we had heard testimony that it's potentially the ability to move Ward 12 further west, the eastern part of Ward 12 further west. A lot of direction there. Essentially remove it from the east side boundaries. But then that causes a ripple effect from 2 and 3. And so we need to be cognizant of sort of what's happening in those areas as well. If we keep downtown whole, then we may not be able to move the boundary of Benefit Street, or we may not have been able to keep Ward 3 from shifting further east over to the Blackstone Boulevard. So these are the choices that we had to weigh as a committee. And so that's why we have maps 1 and 2. I'll tell you, I think everyone's heard me say this, but I am the one who asked Ryan, what happens if Ward 3 comes down Benefit instead of, and that way we can remove Ward 12 from the east side and keep it, keep 2, 3, and 1 being sort of east side community. It's not ideal. It doesn't follow necessarily our contiguous or compactness, but from my perspective, perhaps it's a better way to have the east side counselors work together with Benefit Street rather than a Ward 12 counselor and a Ward 2 counselor on Benefit Street. And so while you see this on map 2, that was sort of my, Ryan, is this a possibility? Could this happen? And in fact, it can happen. And I think it's a fair trade-off for a lot of the other things that we have to weigh. I am comfortable talking about map 2 as Nick proposed. Fellow committee members, what are your thoughts?
Sure. So, yes, I mean, I think I'm comfortable talking about some combination of the two. I am very comfortable not talking about not breaking up downtown, for sure. And I think, you know, we've spoken about this a little bit, but we have solved a lot of some of the problems that came up with testimony in a lot of the other areas of the map. And I think that's extremely positive. So I think if we're focused on map 2, then I just want to raise some additional concerns.
Yes.
So I would want, you know, the boundaries of 5 and 6. I think that we need to think about, not entirely, but the pieces from map 1 here, right? Because then we're talking about maintaining public spaces for constituents in Ward 6 to hold a public meeting in their ward, to enjoy public parks in their ward, right? So I think that part of map 1 looks great to me. So I'd like to see us be able to do that in map 2. I actually, and I apologize, Councilwoman LaFortune, I need to look up where Nathan Bishop is, but I think I'm understanding that it's this part in map 2 that is now green.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
It's
So-
it's along the.
Yep. So I think that raises a concern, because I also think, even though I can't tell you exactly where it is right this second, I also think of Nathan Bishop as like a little bit of a heart of Ward 3, and very central to Mount Hope. And so that raises some concern for me. And then, you know, I know that in map 2, we are crossing 610. I think we've already said there wasn't a lot of places for Ward 13 to go, where we've got highways all around. But we do have this other issue with Ward 3, where we're not really geographically compact. When we head down to Benefit, we're not really contiguous, right? So, and then I didn't even realize that we were removing Nathan Bishop from the ward. So I guess that lands me with how can we solve those things and move forward with, you know, with coming to an agreement on that too. And then I'm actually, Sharon Steele brought up this part, this difference between map 1 and map 2 of a piece of downtown that ends up back in 12 versus Ward 1, a tiny little corner. I think that's what's at the train station.
That's before the train station, I think.
Okay.
I think that's, I'm thinking of it on the point of the river as it comes down behind Water Place Park.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
that restaurant right there. I'm thinking the name of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna check with Ryan on this, but my assumption is that is done because if 12 would then need population, and since we're removing.
One would be too big with that building.
Okay.
With that, I think it's called Center Place.
Yep.
Yeah, that is too much population for one, the downtown vehicle.
Thank you.
Yeah, Councilman Miller, I have to say, I definitely, I prefer the clean line along Chalkstone Avenue for Ward 6, and I think that addresses the longstanding civic building issue over there. The clean line, I should say, from proposed map 1, Ryan. If there's a way to replicate that in map 2 without changing too many things, if pulling that string doesn't completely unravel the sweater, I'd like to replicate that in Ward 2. in map 2 to make it better. And then with regard to that little piece that was referenced by Sharon Steele and Councilman Miller just now, I'm sort of two minds of it. On one part of me says if there's a way to keep it in Ward 1, great. Another part of me says we said we're going to respect natural boundaries, so if we use the river as the natural boundary there, then Ward 12 takes or keeps the part of downtown was never in Ward 1 and across the river, and then Ward 1 keeps everything else as it's been. And I think that's somewhat justifiable, at least based on our principles and our values that we stated. With regard to the Nathan Bishop piece, I grew up right near Nathan Bishop, and I'm thinking about the Brown football stadium. It's right over there that takes up a lot of space. I'm wondering if there's a way to move that block with Nathan Bishop back into Ward 3 and maybe swap it for another block in Ward 2. I don't think there's too much population there, but I don't know how difficult that would be, Ryan.
I looked at that earlier. It would be a very clean line of public streets.
Okay.
Kind of snaky.
Okay.
Could we see what it looks like to move, to make that of map 2, but to make 6 go along Chalkstone? And then also if you want to show us what the Nathan Bishop might look like.
So this is doable.
Is there any way to share your screen, Ryan?
Looking at that.
Cool.
Okay, so this is working off of the map 2. And I have brought in Ward 6 up to Chalkstone that line.
So that looks like just like map 1, but in
Yeah,
map 2.
it's a meshing of map 1 and 2.
And that doesn't push 6 too far over the population equality line?
It does not.
Okay, good.
And then for what we're just discussing here, as you can see, Nathan Bishop School is right in this block here. So the question is how you get to it. The Brown Stadium block has 119 people. And simply put, gonna move like that. Means 3 is now too big. And so if we start trying to think about where to bring it down, it's still too big. You go to Oak Street. Now 2 is too big.
I hear you. Okay.
Right. So I mean, you could do something like that there. You'll see all the numbers are green. But that's the kind of maneuver you have to make to get Nathan Bishop back in the Ward 3.
Well, we've got 48 highlighted right now. If you turn that back green and take the 40 just to the west of the 0 there, to make it any better?
I believe,
It's 9.98.
Still off. Okay.
Well, no, that's, it looks like it's just,
I believe on the other counts, we wanted to keep, if you want to keep the original population within deviation, that brings it a little bit over the line. That's a conversation to have. But it would mean from the original population, you're outside of the 10% deviation.
okay.
Okay.
So what Ryan is saying is that we have our original, what is it, 12,729, I think, right? Is the original ideal population for each ward, and then the ideal population for each ward with the 375 is 12,754. So if we were with the updated population data, we were within our deviation standard
Barely.
fairly,
Barely.
9.98.
Okay.
So,
Well, I guess I hadn't thought about the Nathan Bishop issue until it was brought up today, and so I'm trying to be cognizant of it, looking into all the other factors we've been dealing with here. I guess the first thing that comes to my mind is that unlike Ward 6, It's not removing the only civic building or public building from Ward 3. There's still multiple other schools in there, including Martin Luther King Elementary School, which is frequently a polling place. There's a fire station there, some others. So, I mean, obviously, I'd like to try to include it in there for the reasons that have been brought up, but if it's gonna unravel the sweater by pulling that string, then I guess I'm okay with leaving it in 2, but I'd like to try to find a way if we can. As for the other issue that was brought up earlier about bringing Ward 3 into that Benefit Street piece there, I think there's a larger issue here that we all need to, we should go on our report about this sort of artificially heavily populated block on Benefit Street that's really a census issue. And I really think that in our report, and just for whoever's in our shoes 10 years from now, like that has to be addressed. And maybe that's a conversation to have with, I think it's RISD that owns the building there where all the students are registered. And so it's nobody's fault. It just puts us in an awkward situation because we have to go by the census. So number one, I just want to put that out there for everyone. We're dealing with a problem that is a man-made problem and that hopefully over the next decade we can address just by being reasonable people in our community and working with each other. That having been said, I don't like how it makes Ward 3 less compact, having that little tail there, but I will say it makes Ward 12 a little more compact in the process. I think that we've heard loud and clear from a lot of different people that when a ward has a small piece of a neighborhood, that makes it hard for them to properly represent that neighborhood, and I want to be respectful of that fact when we talk about Ward 12 having this tiny piece of the east side. But we also got testimony from people on Benefit Street saying it doesn't matter which ward it's divided up into, if it's divided between 3 council people, that's a problem for them. So I feel a little stuck on this issue that almost, if we move it into Ward 2, that necessitates breaking up other communities around the city. And so we've solved one problem, but created 1 or 2 more. I don't know that that makes it any better. If we leave it in Ward 12, we leave an existing problem that we're trying to solve. I don't feel great about that. If we move it into Ward 3, then potentially we've just moved that problem from being a Ward 12 and Benefit Street problem to a Ward 3 and Benefit Street problem. So there's no good answer here is what I'm getting to. And these are exactly the types of questions we knew this was going to come down to in the end.
Yeah.
The questions where no matter what you do, somebody's on the wrong side of the line. And we're going to have to weigh our values and weigh the different things we said we're going to put into this and make a decision and recognize that it's not perfect.
And one more thing I'll add to that, Nick, thank you for so eloquently putting that all together, our challenge, our circle, is that if we move Ward 12 out of the east side, it becomes a plurality Hispanic ward. And so it just adds 1 more ward in which the Latino population is showing a majority of the residents there. So it might be an opportunity for that ward to elect someone in the future that represents them. So it's another, I think we have four pieces there that are.
That's a really important point. Absolutely.
And so on the other side, just to be clear, when Ward 3 does come down Benefit Street that way, it does not dilute the non-Hispanic Black population of Ward 3. And it keeps that Mount Hope focus of Ward 3 that we've heard is really important from people who came and spoke on Nathan Bishop and this evening and other nights. It keeps that focus of Ward 3. So again, not ideal by any means. We have 4 different ways in which that's a challenge. And you're right. I'm not in favor of creating a ripple effect of issues and problems. And we heard that if Ward 2 does move over in that direction, then we definitely might. Well, one of the only choices then is to split downtown.
Right.
And we know that is a non-starter for folks.
Madam Chair, we're here at hour 24. If we decide to start changing lines now, you could have a major ripple effect, which means we could be back to square one again after all the work that we put into getting here.
That's true. That's true.
Which I don't think any of us want to see at this point.
No, we certainly do not.
And also, what about Ward 9? Because the way they divided Ward 9 is not right. You know, even you say, you know, the population, and you know, you have to understand, most of the people, Latino, they don't figure out the census. You don't know exactly how many people is in the Ward 9. And you know, like, take the Roy William Park to give it to the Ward 8 and divide it, you know, like, I don't think like they have a, like the population they need. And, you know, like the map, when you take that part out and what, and include Ward 10 in my neighborhood and give me 2 street out, you don't give me that population, you take me out the population. So, it not make sense for me, for my neighborhood, for us, like the way you take, like, because you give it 2 street up, take the whole park, hold the Roger William Park to give it to the Ward 8. And even Roger William Park don't have the people living inside, you don't have to take it. It's not like you give it like probation to the Ward 8. It's not probation, the Roger William Park, nobody lives here. And also, you know, like moving me 2 street up for the Ward 11, it's not mean like the Ward 10 have to go inside. So the way you move this map is not right. It's not really right for Ward 9.
I appreciate your.
Because, you know, like when you move, why you give it up, where you can park to the Ward 8? Because when you do the map, you base in population and the census and everything. Who lives in Royal William Park? Like you have to give it to the Ward 8 and take out for the Ward 9.
Well, there's a factor that we haven't talked a lot about the last couple of public hearings, and that was the effect that this plays on the Department of Elections. There are people in your Ward 9 part of Ward Williams that live on the
Only one side.
and in Parkside Drive on the south. When you split that area between Ward 8 and 9, it creates a very, very, very small pocket precinct that the city has to accommodate for a polling place. So it is best practices to have them in the same ward. And so these maps have them in Ward 8. So there is a population and a voter issue that prompted that change.
Yeah, it's not.
I appreciate your
Makes
concerns,
sense.
Councilwoman. We're going to continue with the meeting at this time.
And also,
Ryan,
you know,
can you-
like I
Ryan,
say,
can you
my people
please,
don't go to that one. So you don't get in that wood.
Councilwoman, we heard from many people in this area.
No, this area, no,
we-
don't tell me because I know. And I send, you know, Carol, because I work in the day, you make that meeting, and she talked to about, you know, about this part, and nobody listened to her because that's not me. That's her. We have an issue here and I want a solution.
So noted in the
With
committee.
our values of putting more neighborhoods and keeping neighborhood integrity, the plans do put all Washington Park in Ward 10 and a vast majority of Elmwood in Ward 9, which gives more political representation to those neighborhoods.
And which is what we heard from residents. So I'm comfortable with the South Providence wards. So what we have before us is a choice to make, Ryan, about a map. And I know that you had a map that you showed us. So could you please bring that back up on screen?
Back to the way it was right after I moved 6 up to Chalkstone, so I'll share that.
I'm not sure that we have the ability to fix the Nathan Bishop issue right at this moment. I think that's going to take some.
Ryan, can you see that?
Yeah, thank you.
So.
So yeah, I definitely don't want to start carving out street by street around Nathan Bishop and create more problems. So I totally appreciate that.
Yep.
I think given what's in front of us, I certainly would be comfortable having this map be our committee's recommendation. I think it would be worth. Then this one, the only thing that's changed
And
from,
that also takes care of the concern of Ward 6.
yeah,
Yes.
that's the only thing that changed, right?
Yes, so
Between
this-
Ward 1 and map 1 and
Ward
2.
2 amended.
Ward 2, and
Or sorry,
map
map
2.
2 amended.
Map 2 amended.
Map 2 amended only on the border of 5 and 6,
And I,
correct?
and that did not, and I had enough of the wiggle room to make that change and not cause a ripple
Okay.
between 6 and 5.
Okay.
So, do we make a motion to accept the map that's before us? At this point, and if so, then I'd be willing to make that motion.
Yeah, I have my hand up. Oh.
That's. I'm still going to make my motion to accept the map that's before us.
Someone wanted testimony at this.
So, the motion is made.
We closed public hearing.
But it's council.
I had my hand up.
In the middle of a motion, we can take a second and then have discussion.
Again,
Is the way that.
I would like at this time to make a motion to accept the map that's before us to pass out. a committee,
Which is map 2 as amended.
Which is map 2 as amended, correct?
Second. Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilmember Fortune?
I'm so sorry. I raised my hand before the motion was passed. It made, I wasn't clear about the amendments. I didn't hear clearly what were the amendments that were made.
Okay, the only amendment to map 2 that we're considering in that motion is to take the boundaries that are in map 1 between wards 5 and ward 6 and move those over to map 2. Everything else is the same.
Largely stays the same. I think that there might be some very minor block changes on 5 and 12, Brian, am I right about that? Or are those the same?
No, it should just be by that section.
Between 6 and 12.
6 to 12, yes, okay, yes. But those are just to make sure population is equal.
And the churches and the church and the school are the same word on the side of the street.
Yes, that we heard last Wednesday, yes, thank you.
All right, and so this means that it goes to the consultants and then they'll do kind of their final drawing, correct?
No, the consultant is here, this is the final drawing. This is the map that goes to the full council.
And then the full council is, has a public hearing in March. Or in March, later in
So
March.
will there be other opportunities? So there won't be any other opportunities to amend?
So this committee ends the process that the committee's doing, and then it goes to full council, and council runs a process. But I would, yeah, I mean, the council can take up issues. I think that I don't know how to finish this sentence. The committee's finishing the process with this map, and then the full council, it goes to full council, it goes before a public hearing. There's definitely more opportunities to amend, but yeah, just leave it at that.
Okay.
So
All right, I just want to. Okay, so that's fine. All right, so it's going to go to council and then there might be some, well, hopefully there's opportunities to amend because I do think that you have a school that is in a ward where the majority of the students who attend the school, they don't live in the ward. In Ward 2, I mean, if you look at the breakdown of demographics of the students who attend Nathan Bishop, they don't live in Ward 2. And
You
so
can also say that about
that's
high school.
fine. Yeah, and I'll do that. But I think those are, but that's definitely one of the things, to take into consideration in terms of even decisions about like education that are being made. But thank you.
Yes.
Madam Chair, if I may, I just, at this point in time, a motion was made and seconded to accept the map number 2 as amended. to pass out of this committee and to send to the full council.
100%.
Madam Clerk, I'm gonna ask, do we need to have a vote on it?
Yes.
Okay, so again, the motion was made by myself and seconded by Councilor.
Yes, we're in
We're
discussion.
in discussion on the
Yeah.
motion. Is there anyone, Madam Clerk, is there anyone else, from the council? Oh, thank you. Yeah, and it's hard when the, there we go.
No, sorry.
No apologies needed.
No.
Yes, of course.
Yes, I would like to say, as a part of this discussion, as far as Southside is concerned, there was a lot of meetings, and I want to thank people like Doug Victor and so many others that showed up. Constantly, they went to every public hearing there was, and they constantly repeated themselves. In spite of the fact that I may have been feeling one way or the other, had nothing to do with the fact that the common interest of my neighbors. And I not only did understand and hear from people from the Elwood and the South Side, I also did a poll of calling, phone calls, for people I've known for years that has a common interest in the neighborhood, they're grounded in the neighborhood. And they are the people who know more about the South Side than I, you know what I mean? Some were born right in the neighborhood, they were born in houses that don't even exist anymore, but they still in the South Side. So the things that I heard made it a little bit more easier to talk and to work with my colleague that's just close to me, Ward 10, which I had to give up some population. I had people that had moved in, and we had to make sure that those people were being represented in a way that they are, you know, that we had to extend. And so in that, there was a lot of conversation about people keeping their neighborhoods, you know, whole. And keeping the neighborhood whole, there were certain things that they had common interest in that we were able to pick up on and we were able to hear. So I can say basically everything, I want to say I'm proud of this map. Everything that have went into this map, I had no idea that you can have a conversation and then we can create a map from a conversation. And so those things did happen. I want to take time and appreciate everybody who came out in the rain, snow, sleet, or whatever you had to go to, but made yourself present enough to be able to help us understand the needs. So I think we've heard a lot from a lot of people. I'm especially thinking Southside because of the pushback and of the trauma that had took place last 10 years. And with that, I think people were able to be clear about their needs. Jessica, I also want to thank you, Madam Chair, for also extending yourself for people who were just stumbling through trying to figure the map out together. So a lot of people did take an opportunity to have more than just a public hearing, but to understand the map even more. So Madam Chair, I want to thank you for that and all the work, all this committee. And it has not been easy. I mean, we've been struggling through a lot of stuff because we want to make sure we trying to satisfy everybody, but obviously is not working that way because it is a map. And committee member Freeman has said even more so and clearer that it's complicated. It's complex.
And that, Madam Chair, I think what everybody said that the people of the city of Providence, whether they agree or disagree with the map, they were very pleased to even be part of the process.
Right.
This is the first time I think the public's been engaged in the boundary process. I know it didn't happen 10 years ago, and I don't ever remember it happening. So I'm glad to be able to say that at least the public voice their concerns. They feel, you know, as part of the process and not just being handed, okay, this is what we as the city council decided, and this is how it's going to be. That's not, you know, I think that's a big thing to keep in the back of our minds out the process just itself worked.
Yes.
And that really is largely because you were willing to like go, Madam Chair, for the record, right? Like that you were willing to go to community meetings even before we started our public hearings, that you were engaging neighborhood organizations, that you were sort of announcing like, hey, Providence is doing this. And here are the ways to participate. So I really, I think we owe you, like all of council, I think owes you a debt of gratitude. I really appreciate that. I guess in terms of map 2, sorry to get us all back to in terms of map 2 as amended, I guess where I am with the recommendation is, so now we've kind of come around the corner and we brought the downtown back together. We fixed some stuff in Ward 6 and we're left with, you know, I think something to still discuss and figure out in wards 3 and 2. And knowing that the full council is going to take this up, that there's further discussion to be had. I'm comfortable with that because I'm uncomfortable carving out neighborhood streets as we sit here around the table in Ward 3. So that's, I think, where I land in support of the motion.
I think, Councilman Burgess.
Can I say something? Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, the members of the committee. It was a challenge and to go through all this, but great work. And I think, like you said, Councilwoman, that we still have some more steps to go for. And thank you for taking consideration of the reports they got and come out with the best solution for everybody. And that's what we're trying to do here, work for the people. And as soon as this thing is done, we have to go full steam to work on that. So that's why we get elected. And we know that we don't make happy everybody, but this is we do the best. Thank you.
I think that we should call the vote. All in favor of the proposal, which is map 2 as amended?
Aye.
All opposed? No? Guys have it, Madam Clerk. What we are doing is we will direct our consultant to send us the final map that we have shared for the committee and for everyone on Zoom. Essentially what we have done is we have taken map 2 and we have amended it so the boundary between wards 5 and 6 reflects what we saw on map 1. And that meant that there was very slight block changes to 6 and 12. And that is what we will be sending to full council.
Madam Chair, I'd also like to
Before you do that motion, Madam Chair, I just want to note for the record and for the public that we will have this map up on the city council website tomorrow morning and also on the open meetings portal tomorrow morning as soon as we get it.
Thank you,
I
Madam
just
Clerk.
wanted the public to know that.
Thank you.
That being said, at this time, I'd like to make a motion to authorize yourself, the chairman, to work with the consultant to finalize the report from the committee outlining the criteria employed by the committee in a full analysis and explanation of decisions made in creating the final map.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. So finally, I just want to say that I have been humbled to do this process with everyone. You know, it gives you a little insight into what it's like to be in council, and I have to say that I am in awe. I think I'm the only one in the committee who hasn't spent time working in this building, and so it's just been a real honor to see how the process works, to get to know everyone, and it's been a real team effort. I think the public should feel really proud about all of the people who have come before us. It's not just counselors, it's not just members of the public, it's all of the offices that are in this building. Everyone from the clerk to IT to safety, the solicitor's office. I mean, just everyone is involved, and it's a real team effort. And I just think that the public should have a real appreciation for how that worked. So I just want to say thank you for giving me this opportunity and for charging me with it.
Everyone else spoke up before to say nice things about our chairwoman, so I'm well overdue on doing it. Jessica really led the charge on this. We started over a year ago, bringing in, federal representatives from the Census Bureau to explain things to us on a really granular level, and that wouldn't have happened without Jessica's hard work and diligence on this whole thing. As Councilman Miller said, I think you've been to like every neighborhood meeting that's happened in the city over the last year. You've been all over the place, really getting this out there. And I want to say, so thank you to you. I want to say thank you to the council members who entrusted community members, including myself, to be part of this process this time. And I hope that this sends a message to the people of Providence that we're trying to be as above board, open and transparent as possible in this type of thing. And let's send a message to the entire state for 10 years from now that showing that this type of open and citizen-led process really can do this type of work. We can build some trust in the community. We can do these types of things. So, thank you, everyone. Everyone on this committee has been great to work with. It's been a ton of hard work, including at least one meeting where I was zooming in and my baby was screaming the entire time. So thank you, everyone, for all that went into this. And I think we've proven a concept, and we can move forward in the state with even more citizen-led things and open and transparent good government practices. We've set a standard here. Thank you.
Great.
So with that being said, there's no further business before this honorable committee. I make a motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.